Okay, welcome to this very special live stream. If you are just joining, we're at the 4 o'clock Eastern Time hour, getting ready for this wonderful Meet the Miniaturist. Please do say hello in the chat box if you are watching and you can hear me, because I always like to test the technology. Um, and I'll give a minute or so for folks to join who want to watch this live. But hey, welcome. I haven't done a live stream in a while. They're fun to do. So happy to be doing it. Happy to have my special guest with us. Can't wait to introduce him. I do want to do a couple of. I just want to mention a few things that are happening in my neck of the woods. I'll wait a second or two just so people can join. I'm on my checking my Facebook. Well, we're actually on Facebook Live right now, and we're also on YouTube Live right now. So please do say hello in the chat box so we can see that you are out there and you can hear me. It's great to see everybody today on this Sunday afternoon or wherever you, whatever time zone you are in. Thank you again for joining. Let me go ahead and start by saying welcome to this live stream. Please do hit that subscribe button if you are new to my channel. Hey, Sandra, good to see you. If you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. If you're new to my Facebook account, please do also like and subscribe to that as well. Before I bring up my special guest, I do want to mention I have an estate sale happening starting tonight. If you don't know me, if you don't know anything about me, I love to promote the world of miniatures every chance I get, but I do sell miniatures also through estate sales and basically usher in pre-owned, pre-loved miniatures to new homes. So do say hello in the chat box if you're just joining. I am starting just to go through just a few housekeeping things before we bring up our guest. So check out my sale tonight. I put the links in the chat box above. So go ahead and look for the links in one of the comments above. A couple of other things. I just had a Meet the Miniaturist open studio event featuring a number of miniaturists who are planning to showcase their work at the upcoming Tom Bishop show coming up in a few weeks in Chicago. So check that out. That's part 1 of 2. Part 1 is posted now. Part 2 is coming up this week. And then next Sunday, I will have a special guest, Corinne G., from the very popular Instagram account, My Life in Miniature. She's got over 1 million subscribers. She's got a very, very enthusiastic, engaged follower list, including celebrities. So we're going to chat with her, talk about what drives this interest in miniatures. So with that, so check out the comments in the section in the comments for links to those things. Please say hello in the chat box if you are just joining. And with that, I would like to bring to the stage my special guest, Al Chailosky, who I have been following forever, and I'm so amazed by your work. And I'm so glad to have you here to talk about it. And I think it's probably best if you describe the kind of work you do. But before we do that, let's go back and talk a little bit about how you got into what you do. So tell us the kinds of miniatures you make, and then let's go back and talk about how you got there.
Kind of hi, Hawaii. First of all, it's been a while since I've been on with you. It's such a pleasure and it's an honor to be on here. Thank you so
please. Much. Great to have you. Yeah.
Just being on Instagram for maybe only about 5 years, I've just met so many people in the miniature world, and it's just fantastic when I meet them. But so I've been doing my work, I guess, technically professionally. I went in, studied set design. And then I became a set designer on musicals and on television. I worked primarily on all of Hal Prince's musicals during the 90s for a designer named Eugene Lee, who is an absolute genius. I think he was like a 5-time Tony Award winner, and I just got to learn so much from him and other people in the industry. And we used to make models in theater, and the directors and producers would block the shows based on our models. And I just kind of carried that into the gallery world. And did what I did. And now, my work is primarily, I call them miniature urbanscapes. There are primarily about places that they're not just like random buildings or commission buildings or anything like that. I tell stories with my work. I do I'll do like a series of like 10 or 12, and each will tell a story. Recent one I did was called Lost But Not Forgotten, and I tell a story about how there were iconic buildings from my time in the 90s in New York. Second part of them, I had to have a personal story about me, so they're not just random buildings. Some personal stories I could share, some and maybe maybe over a drink.
So did you start with a traditional art background, which led to this world of set design and design work?
Yes, that was a grad school where I did set design. I did undergrad at RISD, and I was an illustrator and painter, and I did that. But like my first foray in the art world and these 3D stuff, it's like, when I came to this country when I was 3, we couldn't afford toys, and we were living in the slums of Queens, and everything was brown with brick, I remember, and except for these colorful graffiti trains that would go by. And I started doing my own little, the only way I could describe it is like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhoods. I would draw the trains, I'd draw buildings, cut them out, and tape them all over the apartment. And then my dad would come home every day and lose his mind, rip them all down, throw them away, and I'd start over the next day. And I just did this over and over and over and over again. So I pretty much, those were my toys. I made my own toys.
But at a very early age, you were inspired by the New York City landscape around you.
Absolutely.
And that you channel that into your hands and into your art.
Yeah, I would say the two things that the surrounding area, like the colors of a graffitied subway car, the buildings, the stores, the people, that was all part of what inspired me. And then one day I happened to be watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and I saw the opening sequence of the whole town in miniature, and I just blew my mind as like a 6-year-old. I was like, what am I looking at? This is amazing. And it just evolved into this. I became always known as a 3D illustrator or 3D painter. I always incorporate some kind of 3D sensibility into my work, always. And
I'm gonna share that in a second for folks who may not be aware of the kind of work you do. But it's interesting that was early inspiration for you that ended up being really a big part of what you do today. I'm just curious, during that time that you hit the design world and set design, when you were, did you dabble in sort of this other part that you of graffiti art and urban landscape and things like that, or did you depart from it?
I captured it in my work. I never was part of the graffiti world. I never had the idea to go around and graffitiing. Back then graffiti was like illegal. They would arrest you, you'd be put in jail. Now you go down to Miami to the whole district down there, and they pay you to do graffiti. It's kind of lost its original sense. And then these guys were mavericks. These guys were just amazing. Like I didn't have the guts to do what they did, but walking around in Soho in the late 80s and early 90s, Prince Street was nice, Green Street, that whole area, that was okay, West Broadway. But then you go down closer to Canal Street, where my art store is Pearl Paint, and you're looking at some of the most beautiful architecture just covered in graffiti and garbage and grime and dirt, and none of the places were open. But I just saw an unbelievable amount of beauty in that. That there was a part of New York that was like always crowded, like Times Square, and tourists everywhere and people.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of Soho, there was nobody around. It was like a ghost town. And I would sit there, and my gallery was on Green Street, and I would sit there and have lunch many times, have a drink, smoke a cigarette, sit on the the front stoop of the gallery, and just sketch, look around, capture. Back then, too bad we didn't have cell phone cameras. I would have taken it, instead of having 4,000 or 5,000 photos in my boxes from then. I had a Canon A1, and I would just take pictures of everything, and I didn't realize I was documenting everything. But I documented a good 12 years of my life and New York City's life. And now I'm bringing them back.
Yeah. So let's get to that. I'm sharing. I don't know if you could see the slideshow. These are some of your work. Can you talk a little bit about when these pieces came to you, when you started doing these pieces specifically? And I mean, there's a lot here. There's a body of work here. Talk a little about when it started, when you started sketching, and when you got to your studio space and started actually creating these urbanscapes.
Again, it started at RISD. I would do all my projects, whether it was a 2D illustration class or a painting class. I would add always 3D elements to it, and it was frowned upon. It wasn't like, you know, it wasn't anything like that. But then, as I became a set designer,
Yeah.
my skill set was in demand,
Uh-huh.
and
Mhm.
I felt like, oh, I have my calling here. And
Yeah.
back in, I would say 92, 90, there was only one other artist that did work similar to mine, and it was this guy named Alan Wolfson.
Alan Wilson. Yeah.
Yeah, and he would
Wow.
show at oh, what's the name of the gallery? Like he was I was at the tier 2 gallery. He was he was at the Louis K. Mizell gallery, which was like the top, photorealistic gallery in the world. And
Yeah.
our price range was a lot different back
So
then.
you were showing work like this at the same time as Alan Wolfson.
Alan Wolfson, yeah, but
Eh,
he was famous, and I was just
so I want to
just
go
starting.
back to what you said about what was looked frowned upon, the whole concept of diorama art, or which part of that was not sort of the acceptable thing.
I think the non-acceptable thing was that, people never there was a lot of people who never saw the thoughts behind these pieces, that I'm
Mhm.
telling a story, I'm capturing the history of a place and my history. To me, I look at an artist like Edward Hopper,
Yeah.
and you look at his work, and it's the urban landscape in the 40s and 50s
Right.
that he captured. This was this was the world he documented, and I feel like I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But being in miniature, being in 3D, being in this kind of uh, art, well, a lot of people see it as like, I don't think they respect
The the
the
work.
the work or the stories behind it, or there's an actual thought process to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think it's like, oh wow, look, a dollhouse.
Yeah. Well, all right. Talk about that. Talk about what that looks like, the thought process. I wanted to just stop on one specific slide, not for any reason, because all of the pieces are amazing. But I just kind of like have in my head you sitting on that stoop of the stairs in that Soho and looking across and seeing like a newsstand, because that's what it was like in the 80s and the 90s. The
That's
newsstands looked like that.
Yeah, and back then there was a time period in New York where there was over 4,000 newsstands
Oh, yeah.
scattered in all the 5 boroughs. Now there's less than 300,
Right.
and most of them don't even sell magazines or newspapers anymore. They're
Right.
selling vaping stuff, or
Right.
cigarettes,
Mostly
sodas,
Gatorade.
maps to, they're not selling newspapers anymore. And newsstands it was part of my everyday. I
Yeah.
wake up in the morning, grab my New York Post at the newsstand on 72nd, or the one in Soho when I lived down there, and then go to my favorite corner coffee shops. No Starbucks at that time. And
No.
I would sit and have my coffee, and I would read my paper, and I would pet everybody's dog in our neighborhood. I
Yeah.
knew everybody's dog's name. I never knew the people's name. But I was literally just every day. This was part of my lifestyle.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
walk around New York, all my pieces have the garbage on the ground. Some of it's all littered in those blue Greek coffee cups, because
That's
back then,
right.
before Starbucks, the whole city was littered with them. It just became ingrained in me, like
Yeah.
watching all these things. And the newsstands are special to me because,
Yeah.
again, they're just not newsstands. I tell my story about a time period. I'll take an important story. For instance, like, uh, a hurricane, or the World Trade Center bombing, or the Oklahoma City, where it makes every single newspaper, the Post, the Times, the Daily, everyone covers it at front page. But then I get those papers and I make them in the miniature. But then I have to do my research, since I'm not in that time period anymore, and I have to make sure that every single magazine in that newsstand is the issue that would have been there that week when that story came out. So I have to be very, very careful and, just very detailed that everything has to be exact.
Yeah.
I'm taking a microcosm of time. I'm taking a time capsule of that time period, and I have to recreate it perfectly.
And that is what people don't understand around what goes into making one of these pieces, that you are actually pulling a poster from a concert that happened that week or is happening that week and
Right.
putting it up there, or maybe a year ago, because think about that. That poster was put up maybe a year ago in
Right.
this scene.
Oh yeah, I can't do a piece. Or one of my favorite pieces, I did one of 42nd Street, Times Square, circa 1993. I think that was the title of the piece, and I did it on that specific time because I remember walking around and seeing. Gosh, I forget her name. She did the marquees all over Times Square. I'm
An
having
artist?
Yeah, she's a very famous artist. She did all these verbiage and just visual, and
Okay.
it was all these marquees that were these theaters that were dilapidated and closed, like the Victory Theater and the New Amsterdam and all
Yeah.
those. They were all closed and full of this graffiti, but they all had these sayings on the marquee. And it's the same time I was also working at as an assistant on SNL, doing some sets, and boy, all the bands were amazing during that time period, early 90s. And Nirvana played one time, and they went around. There's all these famous pictures of them all over
Mm,
42nd Street with these marquees behind them. So I had to capture that moment exactly,
yeah.
and everything, including like the Selwyn Theater was the only one still working at the time. So that was part of the miniature that wasn't like all destroyed or and the movies playing were like Dazed and Confused, and movies that were in that at that exact same time. So
Yeah.
historically, I have to nail it, or else I'm not doing my job if I don't nail
Yeah.
it.
Can you talk about that? Why is it so important, not only to you and what you do, but why is it important for folks to see this and see your work, see this through your work?
Um, because as an artist, I think the stories, the reasoning, the ideas behind the work, what I feel makes me the artist, not the construction of the pieces, not the technical aspect. Now in the world where a lot of 3D artists are using 3D printers and technology, I'm old school. I'm still cutting my finger up every day with X-Acto knives. But to me, it's the story, not the execution. Uh, the stories are the best part.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. And I think it's important for people to see just visually what New York looked like.
Oh, by the way, remember her name, Jenny Holzer.
Oh, all right, good.
It's phenomenal artist. She was also a RISD grad, so I don't know how I forgot that name, but yeah, she was. So
Yeah.
the artistry comes from, I think, the ideas and not the execution.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, I mean, I think it's awesome how you just capture these moments in time, and and for me, it's important because I grew up in New York. So it's important for me to be able to point to this and say, that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
No, that it really was like that. I was there, but here it's in
Oh,
3D. It's
and
different than seeing it on a photograph. It's very different.
yeah, and that's my favorite thing. Like when I show my work, I love showing my work. I love having conversations with people, and they'll and the conversations you strike up are I have my stories about that place. What are yours? And take for
Yeah.
instance Pearl Paint. People are like, oh, I love Pearl Paint. I can't believe it's gone. And I used to go there all the time. And I was like, okay, so if you went there all the time like me, my stories are like, what do you think of that staircase? That was brutal in
Oh my
August.
God, that
And we would
staircase.
talk about the staircase and climbing up to the fifth floor to get your art supplies because the elevator was smaller than my table. It was yeah, so you had to walk up. So it's these stories about like my experiences in these places. I was at Pearl Paint. That was like my home away from home. I was there three
Yeah.
times a week, and
Yeah.
for 12 years. And anybody else that was during that time period would have experienced the same thing I did, and it's great that they recognize that, and that's what just really makes me happy when they get.
Yeah, I didn't pull a picture of the pearl paint. So, but for folks who don't know what pearl paint is, I mean, I know you mentioned this where you're home away from home, but it was art supplies. It was like the only art supply place to go when that was affordable. That was downtown in the middle on Canal Street in the middle of, Chinatown back then.
Yeah.
And it was dilapidated. Back then it was dilapidated.
Back then, yeah. I mean, the stairs were so old, and I mean, you felt like you were going to fall through them at any minute. You'd walk up the first flight, which was brutal, but all the wooden stairs, they were warped from all the people walking on it, and they never got new stairs. So it was a challenge to walk up those steps. And gosh, it's like they never did anything. And
no, they never did.
And again, anybody who has been in pearl paint in the 90s and are watching this are going to be like, oh yeah, I remember those stairs. I remember that place. It was
remember
the
narrow staircase and how unsafe it was. It was so unsafe.
And no air conditioning, no central air. They had a couple units per floor. And on August, you got up to the 5th floor, and it was like 700 degrees up there. It was just terrible.
I can only imagine it's been converted into condos right now. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think I can't imagine. It is. Isn't that sad?
Half of it is converted into like $1 million condos, and CBGB's is now a John Barbados store.
Right.
Like all these places are gone. They're not there. So I'm trying to preserve that history of New York, my history of New York, all at the same time. So that's what I hope people get when they see my work, that there's more to it than just what they're seeing. There's a lot of depth into that work.
Right. And I don't think people know this, but these pieces, these images that you've captured in 3D are really what made New York back then. That grit, that grime, that energy was of its time. It'll never happen again, at least not in my lifetime. So, to capture that in all of your work is just, it's astounding. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it is. It will never have that time period back. But then when I was doing it, I was meeting people who were 20 years older than I was. And they were just saying, oh, I mean, New York today isn't what it used to be. Right. So we all think it's like our time period in this world is the most important.
Right.
The years I worked at SNL, I would be like, that cast of the early 90s was the best cast ever.
Right.
Then I find people, it's like, no, the John Belushi cast was better. And then people no, this was better. And that was just my time period. And, and it's dear to my heart, and it's in my soul. It's in my blood. And, 89 through 2000 was, for me, the best time in New York.
Yeah. I hear you. I was there. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your process.
Okay.
Because I don't think people understand. You touched upon it a little bit. You're old school. You still print out pieces. Talk about why don't you start with what comes first? Like, how do you decide what you want to make and then get to this process?
First, it's all about the idea. I'm doing a show in this November, and it's being sponsored by the Society of Miniatures of Florida. And so I'm doing a bunch of Florida pieces, but I'm going to try to do historical pieces, not like touristy places. So I first come up with the idea and how I'm going to group a series of maybe 5, 6, 10 pieces together, which all makes sense in the whole story about them. Then it's time to start sketching them up, sizing them out, just like a Broadway set design. It's about doing the drafting first and the paper to pencil to paper and measure everything out. Then they're built they're very similar to building the old school theater design, where everything I call is on a flat, where I do the actual the main construction, which is going to be mostly chipboard and different kinds of cardstock and cardboard and plastics, but different thicknesses. And I frame everything out like a theater set. So if you ever see like an old Hollywood set or a Broadway set, you see the finished product on the outside, but then you go behind stage and everything is like framed in these, 2x4s and stuff like that. All my work is very similar. If you take that piece, for instance, that I started, you turn it you turn it upside down. You see the inside. It looks like the backstage of a theater set. And then I just start building. Then there's just a lot of techniques that are involved, using foam for the brick walls, using modeling paste to get texture on the walls, using every type of basswood strips in different thicknesses and different widths, and cardstock, anything I could get my hands on. And then the third part, again, I don't use any 3D programs to 3D, to create these things. I don't put them in a machine, and all of a sudden it's like 5 minutes later I have I have a door or something. So I don't use any 3D printers, but I will just start painstakingly recreating stuff. And then when I don't have anything I could use, like let's say that liquor store one, that clock there, which is very important to that store, I will then get like I'll purchase the right size clock. Or my art store now is Lowe's or Home Depot. I'll go through the electrical departments. I'll go through the plumbing departments. I'll go everywhere and start looking at shapes, things I could take apart that I could help recreate something out of. A lot of electrical supplies are cut to pieces, just to recreate stuff, like like the wires in the tubing for the liquor store. That's just wiring from Home Depot that I get. The air conditioning unit, that mesh is literally the
Wow.
mesh from my pool cage.
Right.
So I'm finding stuff. I'm looking, and when I can't, then I'll make my own stuff. Those garbage bags are actually real garbage bags that I cut
Wow.
up and then put real create garbage in them.
Yeah.
The pallets are basswood. I mean, I'm just finding textured shapes and putting things together, along with building stuff from scratch at the same time.
Right.
And then when it's all done, then the fun part is the painting, the graffitiing, and
Yeah.
then the real fun part is then the weathering. Like I basically build it and it looks new. Then I have to beat the crap out of it just to make it look like it is weathered and old, and just layers upon layers of different inks and different paints to create the weathering effects,
Yeah.
until I get it to the point where I like it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing more fun than making rust.
Yeah.
You
Can we
know,
can we talk a little bit about scale? I mean, is this true 12 scale? How do you determine where'd you head at with scale?
I work in 3 scales, and
Oh.
every piece I will do a different scale from piece to piece, because I don't want to get myself in a position of being a production line. I don't want to make uh, 200 pallets. I don't want to make 200 garbage cans. I don't want to make two. I want to do them all specifically for that piece. So I'll do 1 inch scale, 1/12 scale. Then I'll jump into 1/24 half-inch scale, and then I'll sometimes mix it up and do 1/18 inch and a half scale.
Wow.
So I'll do all 3 different scales. It also depends on the scene. Like the Times Square piece is one of my largest pieces, and I wanted to do 5 or 6 buildings on 42nd Street with theaters. So I went quarter-inch scale on that, and it was still 50 inches long. Uh,
Oh, is that the piece that's in back of you in the shot of you?
um,
I feel like I had that shot, but yeah, we use it to promote. You had it in back of you on a photograph of you. I think that was
yeah,
that the scene. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
but then there's stuff like when I do a smaller piece, I'm now doing um, the Century Hotel
Mm,
in South Beach, which is this really tiny, beautiful little Art Deco one for this new
yeah.
series I'm doing, which is Florida. And that I'm using 1 inch scale, but it's of such a small building that you know it 1 inch scale is fine for that. But if it was like
Yeah.
if I was going to do that whole entire block, I'd probably go into like half-inch scale or 1/18,
Yeah.
just so it wouldn't be 700 feet long, and
I wanted to show a little bit more about the work in progress,
Yeah.
what it takes. And this is a piece that you guys had produced and shared
Yeah.
that I wanted to share with folks who are watching, just what goes into it. Just all, I mean, this is obviously sped up by what, 6 months? 6 months in 1 minute. This is what your Optimum, is this the cigar shop?
That's the yeah. It was like Optimum Cigars was like a hybrid shop that sold cigarettes and cigars, but it was also your corner bodegas in Delhi where um, you would also this is where you'd also go get your cup of coffee and a bagel, bagel with the schmear, and that was like your everyday breakfast. I mean, and people that are looking at this, this is what life in New York was for to get your coffee and your bagel in the morning before Starbucks. That's where you
Yeah.
went into,
Yeah.
and they were all over the city, all over.
Yeah. I want to take a moment also to just talk about your photography, because not only is the work amazing, but the way you shoot it is just, I mean, it's incredible. You would never ever know this is a miniature, and that's how you gauge. You don't know that's a miniature. So talk a little bit about how you shoot your pieces. Yeah.
Shooting my pieces is actually probably when people hear about this, they wonder, it's like, why haven't I done it? It's the simplest thing. I'm lucky that I live near a beach and there's a lot of open land around me. So I will shoot my finished sculptures in natural light. I usually choose around 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. or 2 to 3 p.m. That's when the sun's more diagonal and it's not straight above you or off to the side. And I get these really perfect diagonal shadows. And I keep turning. I probably take about 100 pictures, and I keep turning the piece around until I get the perfect shadows. And it really, with the sky behind it, and there's no landscape. I mean, when you're looking at now, that was photoshopped onto a desert, and I just start playing with the pieces and fun with the photography on what these buildings do since they're no longer in existence, and if they got relocated to the middle of the desert. So I just start playing around with some of these, but for the most part, it's just the building in my shots with some of the sky and natural lighting, and it just looks. Hopefully, I'll pick the right picture, and hopefully, people when they see it for the first time, and I tell them, "What are you looking at?"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, it's a photo." That's what I want to get. I want to get that natural light. I don't want studio lighting. I don't
Right.
want anything. So it's just my iPhone and
An
outdoor
iPhone.
light. Yeah,
Literally an iPhone.
iPhone and outdoor lighting.
So
That's
that's
it.
the key. Is really the lighting is key at the end of the
It's
day.
it's simple, and you know what? If you're gonna do a miniature of urban places and landscapes, why are you gonna do studio lighting that doesn't exist in real life?
Right.
Real lighting
Right.
exists in real life. So if
Like that. Real lighting exists in real life. I love
real
that.
lighting is real life,
Quote
so
that.
I don't play any tricks with that. There's no
Yeah.
and I use it, and I don't put them through filters, and I don't change the warmth or anything. I'll pick the best picture. That's how I do it
Right. Right.
without changing it a bit.
Yeah. Well, that is the fact that you don't change anything also is a testament to just the level of detail and the sizing and the proportions and the scale of all of the artwork that goes on, all of the paperwork, all that is perfectly to scale. And it's hitting me now that the level of detail is not only what you're putting on, but the fact that it is all proportionally correct.
Yeah.
Every last newspaper, yeah. Sorry, it's just hitting me now.
Every last newspaper,
Every
every
poster.
I keep going back to those coffee cups. If I do a piece
Yeah.
of New York now, and I had those coffee cups littered in the street, people would be like, "No, wait, that's wrong.
Right. Where's the
Um,
Starbucks cup?
that's wrong." And I learned that from Eugene Lee as a set designer. We were working on Showboat, which is a period piece,
Uh,
and at the end, it ends up being in like early 1900s Chicago is where the story ends, and a car drives up on stage, and I want to say it's like it was supposed to be like 1923 or 1918, something like that, and the first cars that we wanted to buy and or for the scenery They kept on showing us cars from like the late 20s and the 30s, and we kept on rejecting them. And Eugene would tell me, all I need is for that one person to be in the audience and say that car wasn't built until 10 years after.
That's right.
And
you want to avoid that at all costs.
It would destroy the set designer's integrity,
yeah,
his reputation, everything if he made an error like that. So, wow. I mean, Eugene used to push me to like dot my I's and cross my T's over and over and over again until there were no mistakes to be found.
Yeah. Wow.
He was intense, but wow, he was such a genius.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one of my earlier subways. So I've evolved a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted to share some of your earlier work because we talked about New York, and that's near and dear to my heart. But you have this body of work, over a long period of time. So talk a little bit about some other pieces that you've done.
So that's So you're not showing some of my earlier work, which is like I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah.
You're like, wow,
wow,
I did that.
I did that, huh? Boy, gallery accepted that.
Oh, see, that's the artist in you. You're pulling it apart, right? No,
I'm pulling it apart.
Awesome.
And you know what? 5 years from now, hopefully I'll rip apart the ones I'm doing this year, and be like,
well, that's another question. I mean, how do you get even better? I mean, honestly, some of the New York pieces are astonishing. How do you get better? What are some of the things that you see that no one else would?
Detail.
More detail.
It's like now before I would take like one picture of a subway car and kind of recreate it.
Yeah.
Now I'm taking 200 pictures of a train or car, and then like every little, okay, I need springs for here. I need shock absorbers here. I need to the mailbox. Like my newer subway cars now have all the rivets in the metal, and it's painstaking. It's me drilling 500,000 holes with my little Dremel tool, and then I go to like a Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and I buy thousands of the smallest pins I could get, and I'm gluing them in one by one by one, 500, 1,000 times. But then I paint it, and I look back, and I'm like, perfect. It looks like metal with rivets. That's what I wanted to achieve. But I didn't do that 25 years ago. Right. 25 years ago, they were like an interpretation of what was out there. Right. Now I'm trying to painstakingly capture the exact way something is built, from mailboxes to newsstands. I mean, if you look at those newsstands compared to my newer ones, the details is just has gotten better. I've really taken the time to really observe the objects. And you know what? Also, the internet helps with that, because I could Google a mailbox from the 90s. Yeah. And there it is. I could now have it in 10 different views, and I could recreate what I need off of those photos if I don't have my own. So that's a great tool to have, is like it's like a library of references online. Yeah. And then it's just about figuring out how to make it, and just taking my time. Yeah. And doing it. Like this piece I'm doing now of South Beach. It's like I'm going to be adding 5 palm trees to it. Now I have to figure out how to make palm trees.
Well, there's always something new to learn.
Yeah. Wow. So it's going to be a challenge, but to me, that's what motivates.
Challenge
me.
Accepted.
Challenge accepted. I need to make palm trees.
Talk a little bit about that again, if you will. When are we going to see new work, and where can we find you? Because I did pop in your Instagram in the comments, so they can find you online on Instagram. But talk a little bit about the show. When is it opening? And repeat again, if you don't mind, what this show is about. This new show.
Okay, so this new show came about. I was doing a show in Tampa last month, and people from the Society of Miniatures saw my work. And they were doing a show at the Trivia Gallery here in Fort Myers, which I've shown before at this gallery. And they were going to do the show was going to be all about miniature paintings, but they saw my work and they spoke to Margie Lee, who's the curator of that gallery, and they're like, we'd love to have him show his work. And so I'm the only sculptor. It's all going to be miniature paintings and drawings, and I'm the only sculptor. So I'll have like 5 pieces. Since it's the Florida Society of Miniatures, they asked me if I could do, mostly Florida pieces. So I started piecing things together that interest me. When I was in Tampa, I went to Ybor City, which I've been to Tampa dozens times and never been to Ybor City, which is like, I'm Cuban, and it's like the Cuban community there. So it was the cigar capital of the world for a while. And I'm looking around and I'm like, this place is amazing. It's like, me as a Cuban, I've never been here before. Are you kidding me? So I'm going to do one of those really great cigar shops that represent that town. And so, then we're going to do Captain Tony's, which is one of my favorite bars, which is actually older than McSorley's in Key West. And it was the original Sloppy Joe's. And the reason I'm going to do that one and not Sloppy Joe's is because Hemingway never stepped foot in the current Sloppy Joe's. When he was in Key West and he went to Sloppy Joe's from 33 to 37, it was the Sloppy Joe's was where Captain Tony's is now. That's where he went. So that it's really more of a historical piece, and I wanted to capture that historical sense, not the touristy Sloppy Joe's, but like this is where he was in 1933. So I'm doing historical pieces like that. That mean more to me than just. So I have to first have to figure out what I want to do and why I want to do it. And then I start doing them.
And so when is the show scheduled for?
The show's scheduled for the first week of November. We don't have an exact date yet.
Okay, so fall.
Yeah, it's going to run 3 months. It's going to run the entire Tribby season.
Okay.
And it's at the Tribby Gallery in Fort Myers, and it's going to run the entire season. And I have 7 months to get a few pieces done.
It goes fast, you know that.
That's a lot of time. I'm like, not really.
No, it's not.
I'm at crunch time 7 months away.
Well, we will be watching closely. We will be following you on your Instagram account. Can't wait for the new show to happen. This has been so great. I appreciate you chatting with us today. This has been fantastic. Again, we are following you closely and all your awesome work. And so thank you for coming in today and doing this.
Could I do one shout out to my daughters? I want to say to my daughters, Marie and Lily, and to my wife. They're watching. My biggest fans.
They must be so proud of their dad and her husband.
Awesome. Yeah, so they are everything to me. I just want to say hi to them, and great. Anybody else who's friends out there. Say hello to each one of you too. But I'll just hope you're all doing